Hello, Simone. I am going to, in this episode, be going over the two recent terrorist attacks within the United States. I will be arguing, I think very compellingly, that they are a linked terrorist plot.
Both ISIS?
Potentially, yeah. So it might have been one was ISIS and the other was like an anti-Trump, anti-Elon guy, and they just got on together and decided to link them. So just for evidence, they were both soldiers at Fort Bragg. The attacks
No.
happened within 3 hours of each other. Both of
What?
the attacks used the Turo app to rent the cars.
What? Okay,
Did that
that's
sound like a coincidence to you?
it's a little there the red yarn connecting these two attacks on our board of conspiracies is very thick.
It's
Okay.
very no, I think it's implausible. Like the using the same app. Turo is not like a mainstream
I've
app. They
never
could have
heard of
used
that app.
Uber.
Who uses that? It doesn't show up on you and I run a travel management business. We know the major car rental apps. I've never heard of this. It's
I've
not even
never
like
heard of
you're
Turo either. Yeah.
yeah,
So
weird.
I and that they're both at the same base. And keep in mind, this base was states away from where the attacks happened.
Yeah.
Right? So were they both active?
It would be extra bad if people in active military are being radicalized by foreign forces. Really, really bad look. And we've already received word from people who listen to the podcast, for example, no, who've read our books talking about problems within the US military, which is sobering. And this is from commissioned officers. If we're adding this to the existing list of problems, which did not include this as an issue that people were hearing from or reporting, that is very scary. I am very concerned.
The New Orleans Muslim one who connected himself to ISIS was not active. The Tesla one was active. He was a Army Special Forces Operation Master Sergeant, a senior enlisted rank in the Green Berets, and he was on approved leave from his assignment in Germany at the time of the incident.
Oh, okay, thank goodness. All right, I'm taking that off my list of active concerns. Though, of course, if ex-military people are being radicalized, it's a testament to the extent to which we don't support military. And I don't just mean that in terms of the Department of Veterans Affairs. I also mean that in the context of larger society promoting and helping people who are ex-military. Remember when I worked for that one company we won't mention, and I was helping them recruit a sales team, and some of our best candidates were ex-military, and they just got passed over consistently for grads of prestigious universities instead, even though these ex-military people were 10 times more competent as
What makes you feel
salespeople.
any better, ex-military guys have a huge advantage for government jobs. The
Yeah,
government
that
needs
yes, of course. And for if you're doing procurement, if you start your own business, yeah, they have some advantages. I do feel like society broadly could do better for people who serve our country.
I don't know. The government jobs thing is a pretty big one. The government needs to like create an argument if they're hiring somebody over a military personnel, ex-military personnel. That's pretty powerful thing to have under your belt.
That is, I guess if you want to keep working for the government, which not everyone does.
True. All right. So let's hear about the responses that there's been to this, by the way.
Okay.
Elon's is my favorite. The gist of what Elon said was that making fun of the person who did it because he said he was an idiot for using a Tesla truck because it contained the blast. And that they're built so strong as an opportunity to advertise his trucks. But what's funny is I read that and I was like, oh my God, what a ham. And then it turns out that the investigators are also saying, actually, it did contain the blast. And if it had been another type of car, there would have been other casualties. So, okay, Elon. I love Trump's take here is our country is a disaster, a laughing stock all over the world. This is what happens when you have open borders with weak, ineffective, and virtually non-existent leadership. And then he goes on a rant about how the DOJ and FBI and Democratic states have been investigating him with like false crimes instead of working on real criminals. And it's like, I mean, kind of true. They also currently believe that there were other people involved in this.
So other people planted, or I'm assuming incendiary or explosive devices around New Orleans and planned on detonating them, but then chickened out last minute.
or didn't. Also, a remote control was found inside the car, the one in the New Orleans case, which it's not clear if it was meant to drive the car or meant to set off explosives. But it
Oh.
seems like there was a last minute change of plans or something because the other devices didn't go off and that one wasn't used remotely. Also, here is a quote: "We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible," end quote, said the assistant special agent to the
Oh.
FBI New Orleans field office. "We're aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates." Note, a piece by the New York Times this morning has gone back on this claim, arguing that he did act alone.
Yikes. Oh gosh. So there are other people at large who have been involved in this. And I mean, collectively across these two incidents, more than 20 people are dead. I mean, this is not. Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So
This is why we don't go outside. Okay. This is
just on the
why
first
we.
instance, we have Matthew Livensberger or something. So this was the guy who did the attack on Trump Tower. Oh, this is the Elon tweet. I found it. "The
Oh.
evil knuckleheads picked the wrong vehicle for a terrorist attack. Cybertruck actually contained the explosion and directed the blast upwards." So anyway, he set off the car in front of a Trump establishment, specifically the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas Boulevard. I don't think that there's any hiding that this was an attack directed at Trump and Elon. Quick note here, other new information. It appears that he had shot himself before the car exploded. And with the other attack, a Ford car was used, which to me indicates he's trying to attack like American manufacturing, symbols of America. He had an ISIS flag in the back of the car. This was in the Louisiana one. He had been a Muslim most of his life, but was raised a Christian. And he did a video saying that he was doing it for ISIS right before the attack.
Okay.
So with that guy, we know his motivation was ISIS and radicalization. With the other guy, we don't know. We do know that a person that he was married to, because like another weird thing about these guys is there's no social media footprint or like nothing we can find. But we can find Sarah Linsberger, so this would be his wife or maybe ex-wife, had an active social media account prior to 2016, where at one point she did post in response to Trump, like an anti-Trump meme. She said, "I follow his Twitter just to get my morning motivation to kill someone, or maybe just motivation to lift heavy." Now, a lot of people are stopping after they kill someone. "I'm wondering if I should replace my Rousey Lewin and Ali posters with Trump in my basement." So, it's an off-color joke that comes off really bad after this. Just to note, there is some random person with tangential connections to this guy going around telling newspapers he was a pro-Trump guy. That seems insanely unlikely given everything else we know, but I just wanted to include that here for fullness. But I don't know. Basically, what we know is he was surrounded by anti-Trumpers in the first election cycle, but I mean, so was JD Vance. So,
Yeah.
that didn't
Yeah.
radicalize him. So, yeah, I'm surprised by that, and I'll also post pictures of this guy. He looks like a normal guy, actually. This map here shows the over 1,000-mile route he had to drive to get to the location from where he started to create this attack. This, to me, is part of what lends credence to these two attacks being connected, that they happened within 3 hours of each other, and yet both people had to drive so far to do them. The other thing I'd note here is we now also know that this guy was very pro-Ukraine and was trying to help people in minor ways, not like a big operation or anything like that, get active within the Ukraine military. Now, let's go to the New Orleans attack. Something that you pointed out to me that I thought was really interesting is there were supposed to be barricades, and there had been barricades in place to prevent somebody from doing this, but the barricades were in the process of being replaced in preparation for hosting the Super Bowl. So they were removed for a short period, which allowed the attack to happen. And he ended up killing a number of people in this. He had rented a Ford F Lightning, and there was an ISIS flag found tied to the truck's trailer hitch, which is an interesting place to put it. Why not put it in the truck? Why not?
Yeah, like it nicely displayed in a window. Seems a little disrespectful, but
Maybe it was so because if like a cop saw you driving around with an ISIS flag in your back window, you might get, pulled over. It was meant to be found afterwards.
Oh, perhaps. Could it
Um,
be, though, that this ISIS association stuff is just a misdirection?
I mean, the guy was Muslim. If I was a Muslim and I wasn't ISIS or a radicalized Muslim, the last thing I would want to do is call that connection between Muslims and ISIS.
Yes and no. In our Iran episode, there were a lot of people who said that they were Shia, for example, and then they're like, yeah, and I don't believe in God or anything. Like, I don't practice my religion. And I could imagine in some kind of other effort to cause terror or destabilize. I mean, the most likely explanation, of course, is that this is ISIS associated because they said it's ISIS associated, and that's fine.
I don't think that is. I don't think it is ISIS associated.
Okay, well then
I think it's
they said
ISIS
it was
inspired, not associated.
inspired. Sorry, inspired. ISIS
No, it's
inspired.
a big difference. I don't think they had
Yeah,
any
no.
role in
That,
planning
yes. ISIS did not organize this. But I mean, anyway, like if I were trying to organize something like that, I might say it's ISIS inspired when instead I was doing something else. But I guess it doesn't really matter.
Note here that this guy was a Muslim convert who was raised Christian, which further makes Simone's position unlikely.
I mean, because I'm trying to figure out, like, to what extent is this just people losing their minds and increasingly driving cars into Christmas markets and people celebrating the New Year in New Orleans and people having fun in Las Vegas? Or are there people who are trying to send messages from a more centralized authority? I'm assuming not. I'm assuming this is grassroots, that this is more, I mean, whether it's something that people rally around, like the United Healthcare shooting, or things that people really hate, like these acts of terror. Is this just the new grassroots people taking action into their own hand world that we live in?
Well, so I think that a lot of people feel that the system is unresponsive, and they have been told that the system is unresponsive to them, that their votes don't matter. I mean, that's why you have a democracy. So you don't need to go out and do things like this to affect
Yeah.
political change. But if you don't feel that your votes matter, if you don't feel that the legal system is protecting you, if you don't feel, that's when things like this become, in some people's minds, mandated.
Yeah.
Um,
Gosh, okay. I feel like on a societal level, society is being trained to fail the marshmallow test. I'm not sure if you were familiar with some follow-up research done on the marshmallow test.
no, tell me.
For context, the marshmallow test is, there are lots of really cute videos of this online where researchers put kids in rooms with marshmallows and say, I've got to go do something really quick. I'll be right back. But if you don't eat that marshmallow, I'll give you 2 when I come back. And so the kids are like, this is, to measure their ability to delay gratification in an effort for a bigger reward. And it's supposed to correlate with all these better outcomes later in life. And of course, the videos are cute because the kids are like doing everything they can to not eat the marshmallows, or like eat part of the marshmallows but conceal it because they can't not eat the marshmallow. Very cute. But I think some follow-up research on this found that a lot of the kids who were failing the marshmallow test and just eating the marshmallow came from environments in which they'd been systematically disappointed by adults. It wasn't that they had poor impulse control. It's that they didn't trust the society they lived in. They didn't trust that if someone said, I will give you 2 marshmallows, that they're going to get 2 marshmallows. And I feel like maybe we're kind of getting to that point in society where society has promised us marshmallows, that if you go to college and you get the student debt, you're going to get a job and you're going to be okay. And if you are nice to women and you treat them with respect, you're going to end up with a wife and kids in the end. And just sort of collectively on all fronts, from a social standpoint, from an economic standpoint, even from a political standpoint, we are being lied to. And then what happens when society is trained that they're not going to get 2 marshmallows if they don't eat the marshmallow? They're always going to eat the marshmallow. And that's not just in the form of acts of terror or taking law into their own hands, but it's in the form of not saving money anymore, in the form of not trying to delay any sort of gratification or hard work in favor of the future, because we can't trust the future anymore. And that's scary.
So I agree with you to an extent, but I think that the bigger thing here is that Democrats. So I was watching a video today by Mark Hamill, the guy who played Luke
Oh
Skywalker.
yeah. Okay. It was like
And
that Mark Hamill. What
yeah,
does he?
he's gone off the deep end. It was funny. It only had like 800 views or something, and it had
What?
him and
Oh,
Gavin Newsom in it.
what?
Yes, it was a
Wait, like
podcast.
Gavin Newsom was with him, or he just included a clip of him?
No, it was 4 people talking, and 2 of them were Mark Hamill and Gavin Newsom, and it had under 1,000 views.
What?
Yeah, the guy on this, like, anyway,
Okay.
wild, but just nobody cares what these people have to say anymore. But the point being, and this was on YouTube, like maybe it had a big audience somewhere else, but on YouTube,
Yeah.
like nobody
Yeah.
cared.
Maybe all on
Um,
TikTok or something. Yeah.
But anyway, well, no, it was like a long form video. But anyway,
Oh,
he was
wow.
going on about how we're living under a fascist dictatorship now, basically. And a
Oh,
lot
okay.
of people are saying stuff like this, where they are saying that they really believe. Remember when I said, like, what this election cycle basically boiled down to was the core Democratic argument was based on a fictional reality that we don't live in, a reality where, like, Trump was going to take away abortion rights for everyone, and that women were going to be locked up, and Africans were going to be made slaves again, and like
Right.
people
Yeah.
were going to like go to the breeding pens, and like I point out, but they really believe this distorted reality. They
Yeah.
really believe that these people are like a totalitarian takeover of the United States. And this creates an issue because then they believe that they have a moral mandate to act on that. And I think that a lot of this is really parallel to our thoughts on Luigi Mangione, which, by the way, I love that this channel, like, we've made so many right calls on this channel in terms of, like, I was like, no, this is not going to turn out to be the wife. Everyone thought it was the wife at that time. I was like, it's going to turn out to be a random person who is dealing with this and saw themselves as a hero. And I think I even also said that it gave off, was it, at least we had said this privately, that it gave off Andover vibes.
Oh my gosh, you did say that. I don't know
But
if that was on the podcast. I think it might have
it
just
might not
broken
have been on
there.
the podcast,
Yeah.
but he wasn't actually an Andover student, but it was
No,
very
but he was like
similar.
in a sort of elite New Jersey private school kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then even with crypto, like, we might have been wrong about saying to sell it, but we were about 3 months early to the quantum computing FUD that has been doing the rounds now. So at least you get ideas early. And with this one right here, I've said these 2 attacks are connected. And the mainstream media right now, the narrative is they're not connected. So we'll see.
Mm.
We'll see if I can continue to keep hitting these. But with the Luigi Mangione, to get back to this, I've been like, look, this guy, and we point out in that video, he had changed the company's policy. So they were approving dramatically fewer health insurance claims. And
Yeah.
in a way that the company knew that they were not approving claims that they should have been approving. By the own internal reporting, 90% of the approvals that were denied by the AI should not have been disapproved. And yet they continue to use it despite lawsuits. So
Right.
this was a
Like
person who,
United Healthcare continued to have a huge false positive rate on rejections because they knew that most people weren't going to contest it, and ultimately that would save them money, and they
well,
weren't doing
more
their
than
job.
just that, they also, like, even when people did contest it, they just put it back into the system often.
Ugh.
So you had a system that we know from the data was killing people, like, actively in the process of leading to people's deaths. And people are like, well, not giving somebody money when they have a life, risking disease, that's not murdering them. And I was like, it is if they have been giving you money for the past 10 years under a legal contract that says you will give them the money back when they need it, and they need it. They have fulfilled the legal contract, but you have a big company and the government won't do anything about it. Individuals, as somebody pointed out in the comment section of that, every genocide in history, or almost every genocide in history, has been done legally. You need to ask yourself, when do you say, yes, well, the murderer is doing it legally, but I know the court system won't do anything about this. And we know the court system wasn't going to do anything about this because many people had tried to get the court system to do something about this. So I don't think that we should live in a world where people can go and murder, I love people are like, what? This is anti-CEO. And I'm like, that's the most insane thing ever. That's like me saying Epstein, got what was coming to him is anti-Jewish. It's like, what? I am against mass murderers. I don't care if they're CEOs or not CEOs, or, I think that we should be doing something against ongoing mass murderers who say, I am going to continue to do this mass murder, and
Just a
who,
thought.
that's what I was against. Him being a CEO had nothing to do with it in my book. And I think that if we enter a society where we say, well, yeah, but if the person is a rich CEO, then mass murder is okay, that's when people begin to build justification around killing CEOs because you live in a society where all the other rich people are like, oh my God, he killed a rich person. I mean, they have gotten so used to the idea that different laws apply to them than anyone else. And they can, for example, go to Epstein's Island. Has anyone who's gone to Epstein Island faced repercussions for what they were doing? Does anyone really expect a celebrity to be arrested over the Diddy party controversy, despite what was going on at those parties? Despite that we know the individuals who were at them? No. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you have over a certain level of income. The horror from the Luigi Mangione case comes not from the fact that he broke the law or that he killed someone in New York. After all, how many random people are killed in New York every day? People don't freak out. The horror comes from the fact that somebody who was thought of as in a protected class faced repercussions for their actions. The only through lines between the Luigi Mangione case and these cases are that somebody broke the law to try to achieve their ends. And yet, if I've been pointing out, if you place a blanket moral prohibition upon any action that breaks the law, well, then you've got a big problem, because that is how fascist dictatorships rise up. That's how genocides happen. We have just normalized that as a society. And it horrifies me that people could draw any level of connection between what Luigi Mangione did and what these guys did. In that these guys intended to kill innocent people to scare, like, society at large. Whereas Luigi Mangione was very intentional. It appears that he even shot the guy in the leg first to make sure that he could see his face so that he could confirm that he wasn't accidentally killing the wrong person. And we have already seen positive effects from his actions. Specifically, some of our followers who had kids who needed medication that was planned to be made obsolete by actually United Healthcare. Immediately after the coverage of it was planned to be made obsolete. Immediately after the shooting, or within a few weeks of the shooting, they got notification that the obsolescence that was planned had been canceled. And we've heard reports of all sorts of people saying that previously either planned to be canceled coverage areas or rollbacks with AI reviews of plans and stuff like that no longer being used. So we're at a point now where Luigi Mangione's actions have pretty uncontroversially already saved a number of lives. And I need to ask, why were those lives less important than the life that he took? And this argument of, oh, well, he was just doing what anyone else in the industry was doing. He was not. It was more than double the industry standard, and it had increased under his reign, and he knew that 90% of the claims that they were denying contractually he was supposed to be upholding. This had already been reviewed. This was like well known in the company because of the AI software that they were using. People desperately want to live in a world that's morally easy, a world where, well, there's people who follow the law and there's people who break the law. And that world can exist when you have just laws that are equally applied. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. Whose fault is that? Well, you could say it's the fault of society. You could say it's the fault of the people not equally applying the law. You could say it's the fault of bad laws existing. Whatever the case being, we just do not live in that world. And when you retreat into the shell of lawbreakers and non-lawbreakers, murderers and non-murderers, then you end up being one of those people who works at a concentration camp or helps return the slave that's trying to run away. In every generation, there is a plurality of the population that attempts to sit snug under the covers of society has finally figured out morality. And the cultural norms within our society are the moral nexus of reality. And yet, we look back at all of those times and see horrors that were carried out. People want to believe that nothing that they're doing today could be seen as the moral equivalent of returning the escaping slave. And yet, history tells us that there are almost certainly a number of industries and a number of actions that are happening in our society today that people in the future will look back upon as the moral equivalent of returning the escaping slave, because, well, it's the law. And didn't this person steal somebody else's property? But it's like, yeah, but you have a moral responsibility to build a moral system for yourself and not just rely on the ones that are given to you by society. And you have a moral responsibility to have an accurate understanding of what's actually happening in society. That means he could be, it wasn't about the richness. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the CEO. It was about the mass murder. But Luigi Mangione, when you talk about this like learned helplessness, he had this moment in Japan that he talked about with somebody who knew him that was apparently like life changing for him, where he went to Japan and he said that everyone there was an NPC. There was this moment where somebody was having a seizure.
Seizure?
So he went to the cops to try to get them to address the seizure. And even when there were no cars on the streets, they stopped at every light on the way to the person.
Oh,
And he's
Lord.
like, why are you following this law when it's putting other people's lives at risk and it's not dealing with an emergency? And that frustration he had in that moment is emblematic of the frustration he had in the moment, you know, likely leading to the assassination on his part. And I think that these sorts of individuals, they think that they will be lauded for this. But look, I mean, these people are not, and you see, they're not like looking to Luigione, and people are going to be trying to draw parallels here, but they're looking to ISIS, because the type of people who cheer when you kill an innocent person, which both of these people intended on doing, the only people who cheer for that are terrorists. You know, like people in terrorist countries. And they will cheer for this. You know, like ISIS has like magazines and stuff like that that they put out to try to laud these sorts of actions in other individuals. And so I think there's a similar mindset, but it's a, you know, how does sort of my moral compass work? And it is a problem. And I do not think that we as a society are grappling with it enough, how big of a problem it is, that Democrats face no repercussions for saying stuff like we're living in a fascist dictatorship. That language is what leads to this. It's what leads to the Trump assassination attempts. And that we should be treating people who say that the same way we treat people who say things like the N-word. And yet we as a society refuse to hold them accountable for that yet. And I think that that's something that we should press to change. When people are painting this insane and inaccurate view of our reality, that they are mocked for it, but that they also face repercussions for it.
Well, in general, I really like the idea of aggressively de-incentivizing polarization and dehumanization of the other side. The more that we can return to an era of healthy debate and just a shared assumption that we're all human with good intentions
I
trying to do
disagree
the
with
right
this.
thing. Really?
Yes, I think that your
Oh my
action
God.
can lead to us not fully seeing how monstrous the other side has become if
Oh,
they
like to
continue
your
to go
point,
after.
there has never been a genocide meaningfully that has not been fully legal when it happened. That is to say,
I mean,
like,
right
not
now,
against the
you
law.
could argue by some numbers that we in the United States are undergoing an autistic genocide.
How
Um,
so?
the systematic sterilization of autistic children.
Oh,
Um,
like through the other
yeah,
monoculture. Okay.
It is wild to me that, you know, as somebody with autistic children, I have to be worried every time I send them to school that a doctor may convince them to sterilize themselves and lie to me about this, that a doctor that is paid for by the school, or that the school will have people in it who are searching, saying, is this child a good psychological profile for sterilization? And we as a society know this. We know that this is mostly targeting autistic kids. And sometimes you can normalize to something as a society and not understand how absolutely horrifying and messed up it is. So just try to step outside of what you know about society right now and internalize that this statement is just become an accurate and normal thing in our society. Because I have autistic children, I have to worry that the state will attempt to sterilize them if I send them to public school. And if you're like, oh, well, this is a real medical thing, and I'm like, well, then why doesn't it exist literally anywhere else on Earth? Or at any other time or in any other culture in human history? And if you want to see a breakdown on the claims that this has existed in other cultures, just go see the video we did on trans stuff last week. Yes, gender nonconformity exists in other places on Earth, but this obsession with being seen as another gender, that does not exist. Yes, different gender categorizations exist, but an obsession with them and a mandate for medical transition and sterilization of children? No, that doesn't exist anywhere. Look, I don't give a shit about a society that accepts that some boys want to wear dresses. What I do care about is now we live in a society where it is normalized to sterilize that boy who likes to wear dresses. So why do we need to act like this is some moral mandate that this is carried out? And you can watch our other videos on this. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming at this point, and fortunately, the pendulum is swinging back in the other direction, but that the pendulum is swinging back makes this even more horrifying, that now most intellectual people agree that this shouldn't be happening. Most people who have actually read the studies agree that this shouldn't be happening, and yet the state is still doing it.
So what I'm saying is if you can't call this stuff out, this is an issue. What I'm saying we should not do, okay, is make up completely fictional realities. Like the Republicans are gonna, take away women's rights to own property,
But
or
Malcolm, like they're like they're systematically sterilizing all autistic people. I mean, no, because
they
that's
are
not
systematically
that
sterilizing people who are disproportionately autistic. And I
that
think
implies what your not real fantasy world there implies is that there is a concerted intentional effort to do so when it is not. It is a mindless, thoughtless thought virus that is predicated on the promise of removing in the moment suffering, elevating victimhood culture, and making gender an identity, which is the stupidest thing in the world, but it happened. And that's not a concerted, organized effort. And that means that the people who are behind this, who are, for example, trying to still support youth gender medicine, are not like, yes, I shall end the autists once and for all, which is exactly what your statement implied, which is exactly violating the rule
well,
you're trying to
this is the
set.
thing. I'm a consequentialist.
Ugh.
The outcomes are the same. And the point I'm making here is we live in a world where Democrats just make up insane things and they state them as if they are what is happening in this reality. And they are functionally and obviously not. And
Well,
it
based
leads.
on their definition of whatever dystopian state, that may be the case for them, especially from their cultural viewpoint. Oh no, victimhood culture isn't going to be supported anymore. DEI is not going to be supported anymore. Like I'm entering a dystopia. For them, they are. Like they're not lying by their perspective or worldview.
Well, and
Yeah,
that's the
I'm
point I'm
against what they're
making.
doing, but I'm
If
also
one
against the idea
worldview
of
is
dehumanizing the
accurate
other
and
side
one
ever.
worldview is a fantasy. And we need to like really be calling out this fantasy much more aggressively. Instead of saying both sides need to be humanized, we need to recognize that when you join a cult that breeds this interpretation of reality where everyone that's slightly right of center is literally a Nazi. And note here, I'm not saying all Democrats are in this group. I'm saying there is a group of Democrats in this group. Okay, you need to say, oh, what would these people do to Nazis? Oh, they think that's okay to do to over 50% of the US population. Trump won the popular vote.
Mm.
These people are a dangerous and radicalized faction that is a genuine and ever present danger to this country and anywhere they are allowed to spread. Like, we are not saying that you need to, like, people are like, how is this any different? I am saying that we need to treat them as dangerous because they have declared, I am dangerous and I want to end over half of Americans. Okay? Or I want to randomly punch in the street over half of Americans. And I'm here not calling for, mass murders or anything like that, but I'm saying we need to not hide the fact that there is a group in the United States that is large, that is radicalized to that degree, and that it is, if it makes up all of somebody's social circle, going to radicalize them to violence.
Hmm. Yes. Well, we can agree that memes that radicalize people are a bad idea.
No, I disagree with that. What I
Damn
said, and I will say this again, is I will
it.
say memes that represent an inaccurate understanding of the world or a fantasy or a virtual reality that radicalize people. People need to be radicalized when actual Nazis take over a country, Simone. People need to be, as I point out, my ancestors in the past would have been thought of as radicals. They 15 out of 50 of the founders of the Free State of Jones were either brothers or children of my direct ancestors. And this was a breakaway state that started during the Confederacy that was anti-slavery, and they would have been seen as an insane radical cult, which is basically what they were called. I mean, how could you be against slavery? You know, and you need to be able to, this is the things about, and I really hate this, oh, both sides need to be seen as human thing.
Ugh.
Oh, the mass murdering CEO needs to be seen as human thing. The individuals who act, no, the individuals who say, oh, this individual shouldn't have been killed because what he was doing was technically legal, right? To me, they are in a way as evil as the progressives who are painting this inaccurate picture of reality, because they are saying, oh, well, mass murder is okay when done within these rules or done within this system or done by somebody of X class. And I think that's the core thing that we need to get away with, is we need to re-enter a society where people have to interpret reality for themselves. Stop outsourcing this to groups. Like, actually try to look at things. Are these people actually mass killing people? Is this disproportionately affecting the autistic population? Does this appear to be helping the people who are going through the procedures? Does, you know, we've done other episodes on this, right? You know, and the data is just like overwhelming at this point, right? We need to be able to call this stuff out for what it functionally is. And I think
Yes, but okay, I agree with many parts of this. I just think that like some cultures say there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. You know, you just got to dress up for appropriately for weather. I think there's no such thing as bad people, just bad incentive systems and bad cultures that make people do bad things. I don't think, I mean, okay, there are some people who are like genetically really screwed up and just want to like torture animals from a very young age and hurt people. But
yeah, if you listen to stories about sociopaths, they often seem pretty evil from like a young, and not just sociopaths, but the ones who become like serial killers and stuff
yeah,
like that.
like the scary ones are the ones who from an early age wanted to.
I do think some people are born bad people, Simone. I'm sorry about that, but I
Okay,
think
but broadly, I don't, for example, think that the United Healthcare CEO was one of those drowned puppy as a kid kind of people. I think that he is subject to a bad incentive.
And I will note here that this CEO's policy changes were likely responsible for more deaths on a per month basis than the most voluminous serial killer in history had ever killed, given that 52 million people are covered by United Healthcare, and that CEO had more than increased the denial rate by double in some of the areas in the short time that he had been CEO.
In terms of moral responsibility that we need to come back to as a society.
Okay.
You know, he, just as much as the people who say that, you know, he should have been allowed to continue killing people because he was doing it legally.
And I don't.
Most of these individuals and him have this mindset of, if it is acceptable within mainstream society and if it is legal, then it must be allowed to continue. And we need to call out mainstream society and say mainstream society has fallen to such an extent and to such an insane degree of degradation at this point that we now need to develop responsibility for building our own moral architecture, even when that moral architecture conflicts with the laws of society. And because this responsibility is increasingly important for every American to develop, we at the same time need to hold people more responsible when they are peddling completely inaccurate views of reality that are not based on anything, really. They're based on the way they wish the world worked. And this is a big deal when you consider this mindset that's becoming so prevalent on the left, which divides the world into different ethnic groups, divides the world into these oppressor and oppressed categories. The oppressor can do whatever they want to the oppressed. It doesn't matter. But, you know, sorry, the oppressed can do whatever they want to the oppressor if you're in oppressed category. But like, what modifies you for oppressed category? They're basically saying these ethnic groups or these cultural groups are allowed to, you know, for example, gang rape the children of this other group and shouldn't have to face repercussions for it, which is like literally something we see being argued for within like Europe, where they're taking down posts where people are like, hey, there's a huge problem with like gang rapes right now in our country within this specific immigrant population. And they're like, you can't say that. They're they get to gang rape whenever they want. Or, certain people are
It's
dragging
even
certain
worse
people
than
into
that,
tunnels.
actually. There have been cases in which young girls were in possession of these bad actors, these grooming gangs, and their parents tried to go and get them and were arrested by the police, for example, for drunken disorderly conduct. And in the end, it was that they didn't want to cause racial tensions in the area. These are people trying to rescue their own daughters from brutal situations. So yeah,
What country was this in, by the way? Was
this
it
is the
UK?
UK.
Of
Yeah.
course. This is what we have to. This is what our country becomes if you say you cannot humanize monsters. Okay, when you
Well, I just
humanize
okay.
monsters,
So then what practically do we do without going completely crazy in kind of the same bad direction? I'll give you some context. When you were describing like, oh, wouldn't it be great if, for example, people, when they said things were obviously not true, we fought back. And then I'm like, oh yeah, Twitter, like with community notes. And then I just thought today, Cremu posted something about how people were using community notes to add commentary to a post of his that was not at all accurate. They were kind of misstating and misreading a distribution, a multimodal distribution, and they were basically distorting a true reality that he was sharing. So like we can't even community notes aren't consistently necessarily working, which I thought that they were, and so that's disturbing. Like what do we do then if that doesn't even work? How do we? I want practical takeaways here.
practical takeaways is realizing that we have entered into a post-consensus society.
Okay.
A society where individuals, and I believe to a large extent rightly believe, that they no longer have the ability to influence the government, that they no longer have an ability to hold individuals accountable for their actions, even if they're committing mass murder, if they're above a certain, income level or whatever. And that ultimately people are going to need to choose a side as society breaks down, and neither side will be nonviolent. Okay, but the question is and this is the thing, as things continue to descend, either Trump can fix it. He can restore people's faith in voting. He can restore people's faith in the justice system, that it won't just randomly, like his felony charge is such a joke, right? That it won't just randomly, that's so like third world banana republic type stuff, that the Democrats tried that. Oh no, you didn't properly label your prostitute payments. Don't you know you have to label them prostitute payments? I won't go into this again because we've gone into it a bunch of times, but it's like it was a complete joke. And it's absolutely shocking to me that individuals think that they can side with, like, there's this group out there that still thinks they can side with the quiet status quo, and that is siding with justice, ignoring what the CEOs are doing, but also ignoring what the extremist Democrats are doing. And we need to admit now that no, the nefarious forces in our society that have gotten out of control, and maybe we are seeing a correction. Maybe Trump represents a correction to that, and we will see that. But I guess like my real thing is buckle up. Like you're like, what's your actionable takeaway? My actionable takeaway is buckle the fuck up, because this is gonna potentially get worse, especially as we start actually fixing things. Because
So
once you
move out of major cities and go
make
outside.
sure you're armed, make sure as you begin to actually fix things like DEI, people are gonna get existential about this. As you begin to actually, and we're seeing the pushback, right? Like I think that right now the whole gender transition and kids thing is totally on the back foot, like totally in retreat now.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but the individuals who relied on that to supply the next generation of their class, because their class isn't reproducing, this is now existential for them. Like the degree to which they are going to be freaking out is, I think, not fully being interpreted by people. And I guess what I'm saying is we're essentially entering a state of, you could almost call it like subdermal war. Sim
Subdermal war.
it's not as bad as like what's going on in South Africa right now, but like we are descending into that right now.
The collapse is beginning. And
The
we've always
collapse
said the
is
collapse
beginning.
is going to look like South Africa. Yeah, I guess it's just.
And the individuals who just keep ignoring that the collapse is happening and are like, oh, no, just don't do anything, never act, never do anything. These groups are going to look increasingly out of touch and insane as time goes on. They're the individuals who, and individuals so often do this when they don't need to think about the consequences of what they're actually saying. So often in our pronatals advocacy, when we're like, well, Social Security will go bankrupt if, there's X many people on it for X many taxpayers, right? Like, even at the current level, it's going to go bankrupt. And individuals are like, okay, well, then we just need to end the whole system, right? And I'm like, actually think about you end Social Security, you end Medicare, actually think about how many deaths you're talking about there. Millions? Like the scale of suffering that we are talking about, but people can just be like, oh no, this is a mainstream opinion that I'm allowed to have, and I'm just like, oh well, we'll just end this, or we'll just do this, and they're talking about death on an uncountable scale almost.
Well, and you don't have to think through additional ramifications. I mean, it's very unlikely that they're going to end Social Security. I think the more likely thing is just we're just going to, money machine go burr is going to be the answer here. So massive devaluation of the dollar. I mean, as the general, and I think I'm actually seeing a tipping point even as we're seeing a lot of retrospective content because it's around the turn of the year. We're in a new year now. People are really starting to normalize to the fact that their lifestyle is not going to be like what they thought it was going to be growing up, that they're not going to have the level of luxury and travel and possessions and housing that they thought they would have. And everyone is now adjusting their material expectations downward. And I think that that's really the big expectation that we all need to prepare for. And it's going to come in lumpy ways and it's going to come in fits and starts, but things are going to be more expensive. We're going to have fewer things. That doesn't mean we're going to be less happy. But I do think that's going to happen. I also think that untold number of people are going to die because of demographic collapse, especially if we don't plan for it well. But I don't think that they're going to just end Social Security. No, they're just going to massively devalue our currency, and everyone's just going to be living in a much poorer way so that we can pretend like we didn't massively screw up Social Security, if that makes sense.
Well, no, I mean, I think you see this degradation in life quality in terms of degradation in personal safety. And we're seeing it in these attacks, but we're also going to start seeing it when due to DEI policy, you can see our video on America's Chernobyl is going to happen, DEI policy around like traffic air control. We're going to start seeing, well, and in the hiring of pilots and at the engineering of planes. I mean, I think we've already seen it to some extent with some of our plane engineering firms making bad planes. This DEI leads to less safety, but then also the radicalization and the creation of these terrorists leads to less safety. And the left's determination to protect oligarchs leads to less safety, as we've seen over and over and over again. And we need to, I think the way, honestly, if people are like, how do you protect CEOs? Go after the oligarchs with our legal system that are killing people. That's the way that you make people feel they don't need to do this. We need a system that actually functions and people feel is actually there to protect them, because if we don't have that system, not only will society begin to fall apart, but there is a certain point in society where society is acting so evilly that you have an obligation to choose a side as things fall apart and act.
Well, yay. Oh, great transition. Speaking of choosing a side and building a network of people that you can trust, that kind of gives you hope for the future, because there actually is a lot of hope for the future, and there is a winning side, and it's the pronatalists. You should come hang out with us this March in Austin at NatalCon. You can still register. There's still some room, actually. It's starting to fill up. So now would be a good time. If you plan on registering, you can get a 10% discount by entering the code Collins at discount. It's going to be really awesome. So please come rebuild your hope for the future. with us and other
Especially if you
really
live
cool
near
people.
Austin, you know, that's where it would be.
In Austin, yeah, with a bunch of other autists and non-autists and religious people and not religious people and tech people and not tech people. Come on down, friends.
Last year, by the way, the number of death threats we got about last year's conference, they had this giant security detail. I think they spent like half the money of the conference on the security detail.
Yeah, but they looked really cool. So it made me feel like, look at me.
Right?
We have a conference with security detail. Look at this. Look at that, you know. Kevin, who's running all this, Kevin Dolan, awesome person. He's going to do a great job with this. Anyway, yeah.
What's always so funny is the security details at like right-wing events, because they're always like total bros. They're always like tied to like local militias and stuff, and because those are the only people you can trust, you know.
Yeah.
And so you always get these really bro-y guys who are very, what's the movement that they pretend is racist? Proud Boys and stuff like that, you know. Which I always find hilarious if you actually meet them and you're like, you know, one of the, you know, some sort of essay person, you're like, oh wait, why are there so many black people in this racist group? And you're like, wait, are they not a racist group? Was I lied to about this? It's like, yeah, a little bit. Anyway, I love you to death, Simone. I had no idea that our channel was going to become a random person was killed or assassinated channel. Yeah, that is like one of our mainstream like hot button video types.
Well, okay, and I'd love actually to see what people say in the comments, because I'm interested to know. I mean, I kind of get the impression that a lot of people like to watch this podcast because we can help to talk through events that are happening in the news, in the world, with people like we're your friends, because we are your friends. Like, we're sort of share a culture, broadly speaking, on this podcast with our viewers, and just to hear our analysis of it. And there are lots of YouTube channels like this, and we're just maybe one of them. Or maybe that's not why you're here. So, you know, if you don't mind leaving a comment and telling us why you like to watch the podcast, is it like learning something new? Is it understanding the news or getting some context and annotation on the news? Is it something else? Because I would like to know.
Here's what I want to believe. I want to believe that they're here for new ideas some of the times, but also when big events happen in the news, nobody else really covers them thoroughly or gives accurate predictions on them. And that if we can be a channel that can give more accurate predictions on what's going to turn out to be true than mainstream media, and if we can turn out to be a channel that...
I'll be right back.
And if we can turn out to be a channel that, in addition to giving more accurate predictions, also gives more thorough coverage, covering the angles that you might not have heard, you know that if humanity survives, digital versions of us will almost certainly exist.
Thank goodness.
She was just saying that she can't wait to be fully digital. No, what I just mean is because we've done this podcast, and there is just such an absolutely large volume of recordings of us in fairly similar positions, it would be incredibly easy to clone us with AI copies when the technology gets a bit better. That would be quite believable as us, as you know, and
at least as us on camera.
When you could say, well, just because it could exist, why do you assume it will exist? And I would say, well, because we have lots of kids, and our kids, I mean, hopefully they're part of the ideology and end up having, at least some of them end up having lots of kids as well. So I would want to have an AI avatar of like my great-great-grandfather or something. Like,
same. I wish I could talk with them.
Yeah, like why would they not want that? I'm not saying that like we'll be living on permanently, but we will at least be accessible as intelligences, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is. I like it.
We already know we're not going to die. Well, that's like Google goes down or humanity dies. So we've got to save humanity, right? And people can be like, oh, you won't be conscious entities then, and watch our video. We don't really think sentience exists. It's mostly an illusion based on the way our brain compresses information. And there's a lot of evidence for this. But anyway. Let's get into this. I will. Oh, by the way, Simone, I cannot believe 153 pounds.
Look at you, Mr. Spelt.
I wasn't even trying. That's just naltrexone.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm impressed by naltrexone as a diet suppressor as well. I think that you eat fewer snack foods in general while on it, and would love to compare naltrexone consumption to Ozempic and other semaglutide injections, because it's so much easier to take naltrexone pills. They're way less expensive than semaglutide injections. And the side effect seems significantly less dire. I mean,
In fact,
the
most
side
of the
effects
side
people
effects are good.
describe
It
on
reduces
semaglutide.
social media consumption. It reduces
Oh
random
yeah,
addiction
yeah. So
disorders.
all of your other addictive behavior goes down. Your gambling addiction goes down in a much more significant way than people have reported on semaglutide. Plus, you don't have the nausea, the stomach discomfort, the
Some people
weird.
get that with naltrexone.
Though they do.
Yeah, I
Oh.
just don't. But
Well, then if you have an adverse reaction to semaglutide, you could try naltrexone. But
But to
anyway,
give you an
looking
idea of
good.
how crazy that is, that weight, I remember, so historically I would start going on diets at 100 like 85 or top 80s. Like if it got to like 187 or something, I'd be like, oh, I need to
Mhm.
go on a diet. And I would stop my diets if I could get down to below 175.
Mm.
Like, 171 or 172, I would have seen as an incredibly low weight for myself. And I just randomly measured the other day and it's at 153. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Right, except here's the problem that you're not anticipating here. The people in the comments are going to chime in saying, Malcolm, you've just lost huge amounts of muscle mass. You weigh less because you don't have any muscle. You need to start working out and lifting weights.
Hey, the comments that they're trying to convince me in the forums to get on steroids.
On Discord, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can ask our concierge doctor about that.
We'll see. They're like, hey, more people will listen to you. Yes, you may see it as a pointless indulgence and a sign of vanity, but more people will listen to you. And if you believe in functionality, you have to do it. I'm like, compelling argument, guys.
I don't want to deal with the roid rage. Two, I think you also have to work out to really get meaningful results. And I don't think that you want to do that. I would love
It's
that.
so indulgent.
I think
Anyway.
it'd be great. But we lift our kids a lot. You saw my arm muscle when we
Yeah, you're ridiculous. All right. I'll get started here.
Yeah.
All right. Why are you putting the popcorn back in the bowl? Person, tighten up. Who made this mess? Who made the mess? So this mess, right?
I thought you liked Mr. Bear, Octavian.
I'm doing target practice.
Doesn't Mr. Bear have a kid and a wife?